Hi guys, welcome back to the Knitting Expat Podcast. My name is Mina and this is episode 142. So I'm back about a week after I last recorded a podcast. So yeah, I thought I would sit down and record today. I have a fair bit to show you, but I thought if I recorded this week then it would mean it could be a slightly shorter episode, easier to fit in, and yeah, and then I'll try and record again next week. I used to record these podcasts every week, but since having my daughter Layla 2 years ago, I went down to like every other week, and some months it would be once a month, but yeah, that just sort of suited my schedule a bit better. This week, however, Perry took today off. Today's Monday the 12th of August. Sorry, I just had to check. Today's Monday, 12th of August, and Perry decided to take the day off today, and he's taken Layla into London. They've gone to the Science Museum, and yeah, so I've taken the advantage of having an extra day to do some work and just have some me time to sit down and record this podcast for you guys. So I have a fair few works in progress. I had a bit of a Castonitis moment last week, and cast on a bunch of things. I have a couple of finished objects and a bunch of spinning stuff to talk to you guys about. As always, I will pop a timestamp on the screen here when I get to the start of the spinning segment, so if you're not interested in spinning you can skip over that. Otherwise, yeah, let's jump right in. What was I going to say? I don't have any major announcements or anything to talk about. We do have a few knit-alongs going on in the group. We have the Spin and Make Along, which is going on at the moment, which I'm co-hosting with Grace of Babel's Travelling Yarns, and yeah, so that's going on right now. And we also have the Minilicious Pattern Club, which is now finished in terms of all the patterns have now been released, but the knit along is still going on for a little while longer. And we also have the sweater knit along as well, which is also going on in the group right now. So there'll be links to the relevant threads down below this video that it takes you directly to those threads in the Ravelry group, which, by the way, you can find the Knitting Expat Podcast Ravelry group on Ravelry as the Knitting Expat Podcast. I feel like that was self-explanatory. You can find me on Ravelry as Mina Phillip. You can find me on Instagram as Knitting Expat, and I think those are the main places where I am. And everything is linked down below. I put all my show notes below the videos in the description box now, just it's easier to keep it all in one place. And I will link what I can. Most of the projects that I'm working on are my own designs, and most of them have not been released yet, so I don't have patterns to link for those, but I have one I think that I can link, so I will link that one for sure. Otherwise everything else is our designs in progress. And yeah, I've got some really exciting plans for the spinning segment. I'll give you a little hint now, just in case you do want to like stay for this bit, is I have decided that I think I'm going to sell some of my hand spun, just because I've spun so much and I don't have plans for a lot of the hand spun that I have made, so I feel like I want to pass them on to new homes where they're going to be used quicker than I will use them. I also really enjoy sampling with my hand spun with spinning. I enjoy doing lots of little spinning experiments and practicing different spinning and plying techniques and things like that. So I have lots of like smaller skeins, little samples, anywhere from 5 grams to like 30 grams little skeins. And I was thinking of putting together little bundles essentially of these little sample hand spun mini skeins of varying sizes, specifically for people who want to do like weaving projects, like tapestry weavings, or like, you know, sort of wall hanging type weavings, or, you know, for knitters or crocheters who might want to use them or whatever. Because there again, I don't have a specific use for these. I'm not a weaver. I don't have any projects in mind to use these for, but that was an idea I was having. And I've also been working on putting together some rolags and stuff that I'm thinking of selling at some point as well. So those are just some plans and ideas I have, and I'll probably do another separate video about this when I get ready to like list them for sale. I still haven't fully figured out whether I'm going to do it on Etsy or if I'm going to try and do it through Instagram. I feel like Etsy is going to be a neater way to do it, just because, you know, person buys it, I get all the information, it's directly related, whereas with Instagram it could get lost in messages and I won't necessarily know who replied first and this and that. So I don't know, I'm still trying to figure out the best options for that sort of thing. And yeah, anyway, if you have any ideas or any thoughts, and suggestions on that sort of thing, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And especially let me know if you would be interested in something like little weaving packs, like little packs of like small quantities of handspun. Like I said, between 5 and 30 grams. Each pack will have the same overall weight of handspun, but there'll be different amounts of each yarn, if that makes sense. And because I have a whole box just full of these little bits of yarn that I've spun to like practice different techniques and things. So let me know if you are interested in something like that, and I'll put stuff like that together maybe. But yeah, okay, all that said, let's move on to the knitting content. Like I said, I have 2 finished objects to show you. The first one are these socks that I have knit for my brother. And I'll show you one on its own, might be easier. So these are the Ripple Socks pattern, which is one of my designs, and this one is published, so this is like the only pattern I can link, so I will definitely link it for you guys. Here we go. So it's just a really fun, simple cable pattern down the front, and there you go, I think you can see that better there. And I made a slight modification to the pattern in that I put ribbing across the back, just 2x2 ribbing across the back of the sock. I'd actually knit this pair of socks for my brother once already out of a different yarn, and he had trouble, he couldn't get it over his instep, he couldn't get his foot past here. One thing I've not taken into consideration is the fact that the cables, for him anyway, the cables sort of cinching the fabric quite a bit. So what I did differently this time was I did my usual 64 stitch cast on, but after the ribbing I increased to 68 stitches. And then I did the ribbing on the back to add some extra stretch, and for my modified heel flap and gusset and heel German short row heel, I did a couple of extra rows for the gusset mini heel flap bit, just to give it a little bit of extra room in this area. And finally I blocked them on my larger blockers. I typically use these larger sock blockers for my dad's socks because he has quite big ankles, so this helps like give more space here. But hopefully this will help for my brother as well, so that he doesn't have particularly big feet, but I guess his instep must be quite high, because it wasn't something I realized would be an issue. He's not had problems with any of the other socks I've knit him, but also I've never knit him socks with cables on them, so it was a good learning experience. So yeah, so these are now ready for him, and the yarn I use for this is by Barnyard Knits. It is on their sock base, I think it's an 80/20 merino nylon, and it's in the Campfire colourway. And yeah, so that's going to be for my brother. Don't know why I took them off the blockers now, but there we go, let's put these away. And my other finished object is this. It's a bulky weight hat. I was debating whether or not to share this with you guys on the podcast, but then I realised I'd already shared a photo of it on Instagram, so it seemed a bit pointless not to talk about it. It's just a really fun textured hat out of bulky weight yarn. I used 1 skein of Junkyarn on the bulky base in the Hypatia colourway, I think that's how you pronounce the name. And that's what it looks like on. I literally had very little yarn left. I probably had like a metre left at the end when I was finished. And this is going to be the largest size in the pattern. I thought this was going to be actually the second largest size, but after I knit it and tried it on, this hasn't even been blocked yet, and it's already a very comfortable fit on me. I'm usually like an adult medium for hats, but this is a very comfortable fit on me, and it would definitely fit a larger head as well. So so yes, that's this one, and this is going to be the first pattern in a collection of gift knit patterns that I'm going to be putting together, and hopefully will be releasing soon. So I've finished the first one, the second one is in progress, and I have a couple more that I'm planning on doing as well, which I have yet to cast on. But yes, that's the first one. Like I said, I'm planning on sticking a pom-pom on the top, but it's a very unisex pattern. It's great for men and for women. Obviously, depending on whether or not they want a pom-pom, you can choose to add that or not. And I knit this out of 1 skein of bulky weight yarn from Junkyarn. So, and this is the largest size. So that's great. You'd be able to get a hat out of just 1 skein of bulky, which is great. If you wanted to knit it longer or for it to be slouchier, then you might need a second skein. Especially if you'll definitely need a second skein if you're knitting the larger size. but they are very stretchy. This hat is very stretchy. So, and like I said, this hasn't even been blocked yet, and it's already a pretty big size. It's knit on 6mm needles, so a nice quick knit there. So those are my 2 finished objects, and moving on to works in progress. So the first one I'm going to show you, just because it's right here and it's not in a bag, is my sweater. That's the Colourwork sweater I shared with you guys last time. Here we go, and as you can see, I have 2 sleeves on the go. Both of them are at the same point. I'm halfway through the decreases, so hopefully I will be able to get this finished off soon. I've had the pattern back from my tech editor, so I've made the modifications and changed the things that she has suggested and adjusted the numbers where they needed adjusting. And so all I need to do now is to finish the sleeves so I can get the total yardage I use for this size, and then calculate the yardages for the other sizes before I can send it out to testers. So very quickly I'll run through the yarn. The yarn is by Lavender Lune Yarn Company, the lovely Sam, and she gave me this yarn as yarn support last year at Rhinebeck, and I really wanted to design a sweater kind of like a Rhinebeck sweater, although at this rate I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to be able to get this pattern out in time for it to be a Rhinebeck sweater for this year, but I do really love it. And I'll probably have it released, I will be aiming to have it released by Rhinebeck, so you can definitely pick up, if you are going to Rhinebeck, it'd be a good opportunity to pick up the yarn. And Sam is going to be vending, Lavender Lune is going to be vending at Indie Untangled, and I'm going to be helping her out in her booth, so I'll be there as well if you want to come along and see the sample in person and try it on maybe. I will be there with the sweater. And yes, so the yarn, it's on her DK base, which I didn't realise until after I got home with the yarn that it was actually an MCN base, which is so soft and so beautiful, so lovely to knit with. So the main colour I went with was Cecil's Armchair. I remember standing, because I was helping out in her booth at Indie Untangled last year as well, and I remember the whole time I was there I kept eyeing up this colourway, being like, I really like this. This is really yummy yarn and really beautiful colour. Like, I really love this sort of, it's kind of verging on a bit of like a brown burgundy, almost like a mahogany kind of colour. Like a really, like a mahogany is like quite a red wood, and that's kind of what it reminds me of. It's a very mahogany sort of colour. And we got to the end of the show and there was still a sweater quantity of this yarn left, and I was like, well, it was meant to be, because I really wanted to design something with it, and I wanted to do something colour work with it. And so the contrast colours that I picked to go with it was this green, which is Feelin Leafy, the yellow, which is Raw Honey, and another one of her colourways that I absolutely love. I want a whole sweater in this Raw Honey colourway. And the third colour I went with was Acorn Dust, which is a really nice sort of creamy taupey neutral colour, almost quite similar to this Hypatia. I really love this kind of like neutral colour. Something with a bit of, this one has a bit of speckling in it, so does the Acorn Dust, has a bit of colour variation. I really like a neutral with a bit of variation in it. I feel like it just goes with everything. Anyway, so those are the colours I chose. I spoke in a bit more detail about the design in last week's episode, so if you want to hear more about it, check that out. I'm not going to go into too much detail now. Yeah, so the next thing I'm going to show you is actually, I've got 2 projects in this bag. This is one of my project bags that I used to make, and yeah, so the first thing I'm going to show you is a hand-spun project. I actually have a few hand-spun projects on the needles right now, which is really exciting. And so this is a hat. This is just a very simple, basic hat, like beanie. I was thinking about adding some textures to it. I think I said last time I might add some cables or something, but you know what, I've just decided to keep this one simple. Nice plain stockinette hat. And so this is out of some yarn that this is the very last thing I spun for Tour de Fleece this year, and this is out of some Fibre by Cat and Sparrow. It's on the base is 60% alpaca, sorry, 70% alpaca, 30% Polworth. It is beautifully soft, and it's got a lovely halo to it as well from the alpaca. And yeah, and the colourway was the Map of Love. And yeah, so that's where I'm at. I've done the ribbing, I've done a couple of rows of stockinette, and that's about it so far. And my next work in progress, which is another hat. This one is also for the gift knit collection that I'm working on, and this is out of this beautiful tweedy loveliness, and this is the Beachcomber colorway, by Ocean by the Sea. And I just really love this colour, it was beautiful. And this is how far I've gotten so far, and this is the wrong side. This hat is knit inside out. And yeah, I'm not going to show you the inside. There's a little sneak peek of it on my Instagram. I'll show you a little bit here as well. There are little bubbles involved. I will be honest, bubbles are a little bit outside of my comfort zone. I'm not sure about bubbles yet entirely, but I wanted to give it a go and wanted to see if it was something I would like. And I quite like how it's looking in this yarn. I'm just not sure how it's going to look in the overall hat and whether it's going to look a little bit silly when I put it on my head. So we shall see. This might be one of those that I rip back and do something else with it. But I'm enjoying the knit so far. And I have a feeling it's going to look good. At least I hope it does. Anyway, let me know what you think about bubbles. Do you like them? Do you not like them? What do you think? These are fairly simple bubbles to knit. They're not super difficult. So there's that as well. And yeah, so that's where I'm at with this one. And this is the Aran base, by the way, I forgot to say. It's an Aran weight yarn. So it's nice and chunky and thick and easy and quick to knit. So that's those two projects. Then next up I have another hand-spun project in my Daisy Girl & Company project bag with bikes on it. And as you can probably tell, these are socks. I am so excited by these socks. These are my very first pair of hand-spun socks from yarn that I spun myself. And yeah, it's just super exciting. So this yarn was spun out of Fibre from Into the World in the Corriedale base, and the colourway was Scissors Lizard Spock. There we go. And what I did with this fibre was I split it in half down the middle, like horizontally, so holding the yarn, the fibre out and cutting it in the mid, like not cutting, separating it in the middle, and then each half I sort of just broke it down into as many thin strips as I could. So it's like mixed it up a bit, so they're not like perfectly striping because of mixing the two halves like that, but they do stripe, which was kind of the intention, which was kind of what I was going for, but I didn't want like perfect stripes either, so which is why I like how this is knitting up. I've popped in a very simple sort of texture pattern on it, and yeah, I'm knitting away on those. Just really fun. I'm knitting them on 2.25mm needles, my usual sock needles, and these are Chagus. And I'm knitting them concurrently only because these needles were already in the bag when I started, and I just went with it. I couldn't be bothered to go get different needles, so that's why those are concurrent and not two at a time, because I know I get questions about that all the time, about why I knit concurrently and not two at a time anymore. I do knit two at a time. It's just I had two needles in this bag, so I just went with that. I think that was all the information I wanted to give about that. And I cast on 64 stitches. That's my standard stitch count for myself. Okay, and then moving on, my next project is also out of my hand spun, and this is my is going to be part of my Knit With Me series that I'm starting. So this is the first project for the Knit With Me series. I imagine it's going to be in 3 parts. Part 1 I've already filmed, I just need to edit it, and part 2 I'm in the middle of filming, and then part 3 is going to be the finishing. So part 2 is really like the main knitting portion. And I'm hoping to do this with other projects going forward as well, ones that I feel like would be suitable for a Knit With Me series that makes sense. This is kind of a, for those who just kind of want to watch something and knit along at the same time, or I kind of go through the details of how I knit this pattern, and I'm planning on writing up like a free pattern to go along with the video series, so you can also knit along as well if you'd like. I also explain in the video that you don't have to use hand spun, I just am because that's what I have and that's what I wanted to use. But obviously you can use whatever yarn you have. It's fairly adaptable, and it's going to be just an infinity loop sort of cowl. At least that's my idea at the moment. I'm contemplating some other options at the moment. I cast on initially more stitches, and then after a couple of rounds I realised it was too many, so I whipped back and reduced the stitch count. But I feel like I should have reduced it a little bit more, like maybe another 10 stitches less, because then it would have been a better width. Right now it's a little bit too, it feels like a little bit wide for this. And I've already finished the first skein, and it's not quite, I mean, it'd be really tight as a single loop cowl. So my idea was to have it to be really long with the second skein, and then to be like a double loop cowl, but I'm not sure it's going to be long enough to be a double loop cowl, considering my second skein has slightly less yardage than the first one did. So we'll see. Either way, this was knit out of my Hand-Spun, out of rolags that I'd made, and there's a video on my channel about spinning these rolags and making them as well even. And I intentionally did it so it would be self-striping, so each rolag had a gradient from like the orangey yellow through to the dark brown, and I had 16 rolags, so there are 16 stripes in here, which is really fun. And I have the same in this, but going from yellow to green, and I'm really looking forward to adding that to it. So yeah, I finished this, got up to here yesterday, and yeah, just really excited about this one. Another option that I was thinking of was to add on the rest of this, but then sort of loop it through the inside of itself, so it becomes just like a really long thick cowl, like in this way, rather than attaching them in a long loop, if that makes sense. But if I did that, then the cowl would be this tall, which then I thought would be quite nice, because then you could scrunch it down around your neck and it'd be nice and cozy, and then you could turn it inside out and have the other colour on the outside. So that's the other option that I am considering, and I think I'm leaning towards that, considering this isn't going to be long enough to be a double loop cowl, which is what I really wanted, and it will just be a really long single loop, which is not what I'm really into. So I'm thinking of doing the inside out option instead, which I think would be quite fun as well. So yeah, that's where I'm at with this. I'm using 4.5mm needles, it's US 7s, and like I said, this is my own hand spun. It's mostly merino. I think there's some bamboo in there as well that I put in, which is the specks of white throughout. And yeah, it was a really fun spin, and I'm really excited that I've got this on the needles and to be sharing the process with you guys. I'm really excited to get started on this skein. This didn't take me that long to do. You know, I only spent maybe 3 or 4 days worth of time knitting on it, but I wasn't spending all of my day knitting on it. Most of this was was knit yesterday, to be honest, because I went up to London to see some friends, and I knit most of this on the train up, the train down, and whilst I was visiting with friends. So so yeah, it's not going to take me long to finish it, and I'm just really excited about that. So that's it. That's all of my knitting at the moment. I have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects on the go. 6 actually, 6 projects on the go, because I have Perry's Gansey sweater, which I haven't made any progress on since I last showed it to you, so I'm not going to bring that up and show it to you now. I really just want to get these sleeves finished on this Colourwork sweater, and then I will get the other one finished as well. Okay, so that's it for the knitting segment. The spinning segment is gonna start now, so I'll pop a timestamp to let you know where you can skip ahead to, and yeah, let's jump right into it. So some of the things I've been spinning lately, quite exciting stuff, to be honest, or for me anyway. I'm enjoying it. This skein is a little 50-gram skein. This was out of some fibre from the Fibre Hut mystery box that I got. So it was a 50-gram, it's actually a little bit over 50 grams, and I spun this to try out cable plying. I've never done a cable ply before, and it was a really interesting experiment for me. So what I did was, with cable plying, it's technically a 4-ply yarn, but it's 2 2-ply yarns plied together. So what you do, so I spin my singles clockwise and I ply counterclockwise. So I spun 4 sets of singles, so I broke the fibre down into quarters. I spun each one clockwise onto 1 bobbin, so I had 4 bobbins, and then I plied 2 together and then the other 2 together, and I plied them counterclockwise. But with cable plying, you need to put a lot of ply twist into your 2-plies. So I did a lot of twist in my 2-ply, and then you ply those 2-plies together, but this time you ply them clockwise again, and that gives you a cabled yarn. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to tell, because it's not the chunkiest of yarns. If I had done it thicker, you'd really be able to see it clearer. So it's got like a cabled effect to it, which is really quite interesting. And this style of yarn or spinning is meant to be really good, really hard wearing for socks. This is not sock weight, and it's not even a sock blend. I think it has alpaca in it, judging by how drapey it is. And if I find my notebook, I can tell you what specs I got for it, because that one has been washed and finished. So I think it's a wool alpaca blend, and it's 60 grams, and I got 85 yards or 78 meters. So it's quite a heavy yarn. It's about a DK worsted, I would say, DK worsted weight. So that was quite fun experiment. Then I also, oh, so for my Fibre share box, this is the first thing that I have spun for my Fibre share partner. One of the, if you saw that video, you'll have seen the contents. And one of the things she sent me was some rolags that she had made up, and they are BFL silk, although I didn't know what the percentages were of each fibre. And I will be honest, when spinning this felt like just spinning pure silk. It was so beautiful, and you see how shiny it is. I haven't washed this one yet, but it's so shiny, and it's got a really lovely sheen to it. And so this was 40 grams, and pre-washing I got 140 yards or 128 meters. And this was a 2-ply. So there were 2 rolags. I spun one on each bobbin and then plied them together. Had I had 100 grams and spun them all the same, I extrapolated it up. I would have got approximately 350 yards or 320 meters in 100 grams. So a pretty solid sort of like fingering sport weight, heavy fingering to sport weight. And that's kind of what it looks like at the moment. I am not expecting this to puff up a whole lot when I wash it. So it'll be interesting to see what it turns out like. Whether it does puff up or not. My thoughts are that it won't, because it seems to have quite a high silk content. Then what did I do next? Oh, so one that I did show you sooner, let's say sooner, beforehand, was I applied, last time I showed you this yarn that I applied out of Witchcrafty Lady's French merino fibre that she'd gifted to Layla at Fibre East, Almas. Get that in focus. It's showing up as a very bright pink on camera. It's just a really bright red pink, kind of verging on pink. So this is one I'd already applied, and this is a 2-ply. Again, these haven't been washed yet. Nothing else that I'm showing you has been washed yet. So, and this was 192 yards, 175 meters of a 2-ply. This is going to be a hat for Layla. And then just this morning, I finished the other half of the fibre, and this one I did as a chain ply. And I got very similar yardage. I got 194 yards and 177 meters. So 177, 175, like really close. Both skeins weigh 57 grams. I got a really good split on the fibre when I split it up. And it's interesting because obviously the chain ply, I spun the singles, or the single, much finer because it's a 3-ply, whereas the 2-ply. So, which was the purpose, which was the whole point. The chain ply skein is going to become a pair of socks for Layla, and the 2-ply skein is going to be a hat for Layla. So I wanted it to be a bit thicker. Now it'll be interesting to see how this puffs up because it's a French merino. It felt a lot like spinning Rambouillet when I was spinning it, which is not surprising because Rambouillet is a derivative of the merino breed, and it comes from France. So it'd be very similar to a French merino, if not the same. I don't know enough about sheep to know the differences there, but I know Rambouillet was derived from merino and originates in France, and this was a French merino. So logic would dictate that they are very similar fibres. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what my finished yardages will be for these. Either way, I will have more than enough to knit Layla a hat and a pair of socks. I was mentioning earlier that I did a lot of rolags. I made a lot of rolags recently to put together in little packs to sell. And after I'd made up some rolags, I had a little bit of fibre left at the end of the board. It wasn't enough to make a rolag on its own. I mean, I made a really tiny rolag, so I just had some fun plying that up. And this will probably go in with the other sort of like samples. This is actually a very small one. Most of the others are bigger than this. They have little like sample skeins of spun fibre. Another one that I spun up recently was, there we go, this fibre, this skein. This is also unwashed. This is from John Alban Textiles. I picked this up at Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and it is the Atlantis Light colourway, and it is a mix of merino, Corriedale and silk. So 50% merino, 30% Corriedale and 20% silk. although I will be quite honest, when I was prepping the fibre, I could have sworn that there was some alpaca in this because of how fuzzy it was. But there again, John Arvin Textiles, their fibres are really beautifully prepped. The tops are amazing, and you can see the sheen from the silk in this finished yarn. So unwashed, I had 122 grams, 556 yards, and 508 meters. So pretty good yardage, very happy with that. And I'd actually bought it along with this skein of yarn from John Arvin Textiles from their Harvest Hues collection. This is the Sycamore colour, and I bought them to use together. And I'm thinking I might do it with the yarn held double, do a project with the yarn held double, because I think that would be quite cool. And yeah, so that's an idea I have for that one. And then the final-ish thing I have to show you, I actually have one more thing to show after this, is this skein which I finished last night. And so this actually involves more John Arvin Textiles fibre. I'd prepped some rolags, these are the rolags, out of some Spin Jones fibre. In like she had like a set of tops in a set that she had. I think it was like an alpaca merino something blend. I'm just using the box from a Felview Fibres rolags. It's not by her. These I made from fibre from Spin Jones into these rolags. I'm just storing them in this box because it's nice. And I also made some rologs, some giant fat rolags out of this green, which I was going to use to knit a project with the spun fibre from these rolags together. Anyway, I finished these, and this was these rolags were made from John Arvin Textiles top from the Harvest Hues range in the Sycamore colour. If you can't tell, very similar, basically the same colour. And I added in some, I think it was alpaca to it, and those are the flecks of white throughout. So I added that just for some colour variation and some added interest. And so this, like I said, I finished this one last night. There we go. And I had 141 grams, and I got 284 yards, 260 meters. This is a pretty solid, like DK worsted weight, which was the intention. I wanted a spin something a little bit thicker. And I did this actually mostly, almost entirely long draw, which was really fun. And yeah, so it was really fun to come back to that technique. And I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it on camera, but it definitely has a bit more of like a fuzzy halo-iness to it, and it just feels spongy, which is quite typical from my experience with woolen spun yarns. So long draw is a woolen spinning method, and rolags are typically a woolen prep, so they were really well suited, and it was just really fun. It was really fun, and I'm looking forward to spinning this up as well. So that's it for things that I have finished for the most part. One of the other things that came in my Fibre Share package was a drop spindle, and you guys will know, I've talked about this before, that I don't really get on with drop spindles. This was back when I didn't know how to spin necessarily, or didn't have a wheel, and I still stand by the fact that I would not have become a spinner if I was only using a drop spindle. And I know myself well enough to know that drop spindles are just too slow for me. However, I thought this would be a really good way to teach my mum how to spin, because you don't have to worry about coordinating your feet as well as your drafting. You can just focus on the spinning and the drafting aspect of it. And I think this would be really good for my mum to practice with in between when she's visiting, so she can better use the wheel when she is here. So I thought, in order to teach my mum how to use a drop spindle, I ought to teach myself how to use a drop spindle first. So I did, and this is my first little drop spindling experiment on the drop spindle. It's only like a tiny little sample out of just some fibres I had, and I also applied it on the drop spindle. And then I spun this one. I made up some little tiny rolags out of, again, some scrap fibres, and I spun it mostly, and it actually spun out really quite thin. Let me open it up and I can show you a bit better. I'll explain the big puffy bits in a minute. But the main base fibre, or the base yarn, was spinning up pretty fine. Yeah, So it's spinning up pretty fine. Like this is a pretty solid fingering weight right here. This is plied as well. So it's a pretty solid fingering weight. It's a 2-ply. And then as I was going through the rolags, as I got to the last couple, I had like 6 of these little mini rolags. And as I got to the last 2 or 3, I was like, you know what, it'd be really fun to experiment with like some like more puffy bits. And I've been watching Ashley Martineau's YouTube channel, and I really like her channel for lots of inspiration for really creative plying and spinning methods. And she did this one called Knotted. And the other thing as well is my spinning wheel doesn't have a large orifice, so I can't really spin super bulky sort of art yarn type things, even though I'd like to experiment more with that. So I thought the drop spindle would be great because there's no orifice to have to work around. I can do these sort of like fancier, not fancier, more like art yarny type of experiments. And there's one that she has called Knotted, where you're spinning your singles and then you add in like a slub of yarn, a fibre, and then you put a little bit of twist into it, and then you tie it into a knot, and then you attach your fibre again and you keep spinning. So you end up with these like puffy knotted bits in the middle of your yarn. And I just thought it was really fun, and I was just experimenting with that. If I remember, I will link her YouTube channel below. It's just Ashley Martineau on YouTube, and she has some really fun spinning tutorials, and just she's mainly an art yarn sort of chunky bulky spinner, but a lot of the techniques and things that she talks about you can definitely incorporate into other styles of spinning. Like you don't have to just do bulky art yarns. She also has a lot of videos on coarse spinning and all sorts of other fun techniques that you might want to try out if you've never tried it before. And she also has the tutorials for spindling as well. So anyway, that was just a really fun little experiment, and I quite enjoyed it. These were quite fun experiments. So now I have a vague idea or pretty decent understanding of how this works, and I feel confident that I'll be able to show my mum how to use it as well. And to go along that line, I made up some little rolags, like small size rolags. I thought these would be easier to handle without having a lot of fibre dangling around. And then once she gets used to these, I've also made up some green rolags, slightly larger ones, like more standard length rolags for her to play around with. So I'll see. Next time I go around to my parents, which will be this coming weekend, I will take these with me, and if I have time I'll show my mum how to use it, and if not, it'll just wait till next time. So we'll see. I just think she'll enjoy this, and I thought it would be quite fun to put a little kit together for her. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is some other rolags that I've made up. So I've made myself some more rolags to spin, and look at this beautiful fibre. So the base fibre for this is again from John Arbon Textiles in the Harvest Hues range, and this is the pomegranate colour. And what I did was, if you saw one of my, I think it was the first Tour de Fleece vlog, which was where I did a bit of a fibre haul for some of the fibres I bought for Tour de Fleece, or that I wanted to think about using for Tour de Fleece. And one of the things that I bought was a camelid sampler set from Hilltop Cloud, which had 20 gram samples of baby camel, alpaca, Suri alpaca, and the other kind of alpaca which most of us use in our yarns, and I can't remember the name of it, begins with a H, and llama yarn fibre. And so I've done 4 sets of rolags in here. Three sets of rolags. One has alpaca, one has llama, and one has camel incorporated in with the pomegranate fibre. So these are going to be a really fun spin. Not sure what it's going to be. This is a for fun kind of spinning project. And yeah, so I'm really looking forward to cracking on with that too. Okay, so we're pretty much done with the main content of this video. There are no acquisitions to share with you guys this week, so thank you so much for tuning in. In terms of what's been going on, I've already talked about knit-alongs and stuff at the beginning, but in terms of what's been going on lately in our lives, the main thing that's happened is recently we've changed Layla over to a big girl bed. The first night started off well, and then she woke up in the middle of the night completely freaked out that she couldn't, like, yeah, she just freaked out. I ended up sleeping on the floor next to her, which in hindsight was not the best idea. But at the time I wasn't entirely sure the best way to handle it. Perry was already asleep, and we hadn't, for some reason, talked about a plan of how we were going to handle her waking up in the middle of the night and what we were going to try and stick with. Anyways, as of last night, she went to bed again, totally fine. She ended up falling out of bed at around 10:30. We've put like a bunch of stuffed toys and stuff next to her bed, so she's fine. She didn't, like, as Perry put it, she didn't cry when she landed on the floor. She sort of just looked up and was a bit confused about what was going on. But she only started crying after she realised she was awake and like she was on her own. Anyway, it took about an hour and a half, but we eventually got her to go back to sleep on her own without one of us having to sit there next to her. So it was progress. We had to return her back to bed about 4 times in total, but it worked in the end. We were persistent and it worked out, and she slept until morning on her own and she was fine. She came and woke us up at 6:30, which is fine, it's acceptable. Anything 6:30 onwards is acceptable to me. Anything before 6:30 and it's like, why are you up? Why are you up? Go back to bed. But no, she's very sweet, and it took a while, and I think it'll probably be a couple more nights before she finally gets it. But she got there in the end, and it was sort of sad because you just want to go in and give her a big hug and like cuddle her and hold her, but at the same time it's like, you need to learn to go to sleep on your own. You were doing this completely fine when you were in a crib. We've now taken the sides off, and suddenly you want us to be sat there the whole time, and that's just not practical. Long-term solution wise, it is not a practical thing to have to do, to be sat next to her for her to fall asleep, to go to sleep. So anyway, we're making good progress. As I mentioned, Perry and Layla are in London today. They're going to the Science Museum. We had a pretty good weekend. It was fairly relaxed. It's been a bit wet, but it's just been a nice few days, to be honest. And yeah, later this week my cousin is coming over from Boston with his wife, and they're staying with my parents. This particular cousin of mine is quite a bit older than me. He is actually only a couple of years younger than my mum, so I am much closer in age to his kids than I am to him directly. But really looking forward to seeing them this weekend. Layla and I are going to pop up to London on Friday to hang out with them and wander around town, and then we're going to be spending the weekend with my parents. My camera is about to die, so I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.